I'm Andrea Hutnick here at the studio in Hopewell Valley High School. Today's presentation will be in two parts. The first segment will be a video made by Dave Perry, Tom Hogan, and Chris Swanson entitled The Three Wise Men. The video was made for TV programming class and demonstrates some of the fine editing techniques.
Oh man, it's a good school, dude. You know, there's a lot of nice people, and you know, not a lot of violence, dude. It's a nice place to be, man.
I'm from Lambertville, and I don't know, it's just a better place. I had better friends there. I like the people at Hopewell, but I just don't like the school, the location.
Auto shop, man, it's a good class, dude. Mr. Essler is a nice teacher, and you really get a lot out of it.
I decided to play drums because my stepfather played them, and I always wanted to play them, so I started playing them, then I liked them, so I just played them from there on.
Some of the things I enjoy most about making my own guitar in the shop would be, I don't know, I get to pick the quality. I don't have to deal with like a manufactured guitar where they get to use whatever crappy woods they want, just put them together, paint over them, and do whatever. I get to say, this is what I want, and put it together as good as I possibly can. So what I'm going to have in the end, I hope, would be a really nice instrument, you know, something I can be very proud of and say, yeah, here you are.
The drums, man, I quit my last instrument, which is the baritone BC, man, and I just picked up the drums, and I was good at it, you know, so I said, hey, why stop?
Yeah, there'd be, starting off for some of the aspects, one would be wood selection. Another one would be like tools and all sorts of math and stuff like this. But first of all, like the very first thing, the most important thing would be wood selection, because the wood's going to dictate the sound and the overall look at the guitar. So you got to get that. And then you got to get plans, and plans would be like what shape you want it in, what kind of guitar you want, semi-hollow, solid body, etc. So you got to deal with all sorts of stuff like that, and I just think that that's cool.
I plan on becoming a masseuse. That's massaging people and stuff like that, or a professional drummer, or both.
Rugs, man, I like Oriental rugs, dude, and you know why? Because Chinese food rules.
Oh. The second segment is a tape presentation at the high school by Detective Michael Simonelli about zero tolerance for drinkers who drive. There will be several questions from the audience after his presentation. We hope you learned from and enjoyed both of these segments.
Good morning. My name is Mike Simonelli. I'm the juvenile officer for the Hopewell Township Police Department. I was asked by the school to come in here today and talk to you about the juvenile laws regarding alcohol and drug violations and what the local police department has been doing to combat the alcohol and drug problem within the township. First of all, let me start right up front by saying that Chief Chapowski has taken a zero tolerance attitude towards alcohol and drug violations here in Hopewell Township. He's gotten a lot of complaints about the problem. Some of those complaints were generated from a survey that was done a few years ago in the schools, and some of that was based on our work at the township. Chief Chapowski has done a number of things to address the problem. Some of those things I would like to touch on today to make you aware of it. I'm not here to lecture you about the dangers of experimenting with drugs and experimenting with alcohol. I'm sure your teachers have done that in the classroom or will be doing it in driver's education in the near future. One of the main things that Chief Chapowski has done and that we've been doing here at the police department is we've changed our juvenile procedures in the middle of 1995. In the old days, or prior to 95, juvenile matters were handled by the patrol division, and they had discretion on how they could resolve the matters. Basically, there's three ways to resolve a juvenile matter. The first way is what we call a station adjustment. Station adjustment is where an officer may come in contact with a juvenile on the streets, finds that he's got some alcohol in his possession, or he or she has some narcotics in their possession, and he takes him into custody, does some paperwork, turns him over to his parents, and doesn't proceed with any court action, and is assured by the parents of the young man or young lady that the matter will be taken care of at home and there's no need for any court action. The second way that a juvenile matter can be disposed of is through what we call a Jcc disposition, or a juvenile conference disposition. When this happens, we again take a juvenile into custody, the officer does his paperwork, an arrest report is done, and the matter is typed up on a juvenile petition with a recommendation by the juvenile officer to have the matter disposed of through the Juvenile Conference Committee. In order for this to happen, the individual or the accused has to acknowledge some guilt in the matter. If they're picked up for possession of alcohol while under the age of 21, they have to admit to that, and the Juvenile Conference Committee can sit down with the juvenile and the parents and work out some type of disposition, whether that be a fine, community service, restitution if there's any, if there's a victim who has out-of-pocket expenses for whatever reason. This can all be discussed at the Jcc level. The Jcc is an extension of the juvenile courts, and basically what it does is it handles guilty pleas and frees up the courts for to handle more serious trials. The third way that a matter can be disposed of is by going through juvenile court. And again, juvenile is placed into custody, juvenile complaint is typed up, and the petition or the complaint is forwarded to the juvenile courts, and the matter is heard in front of one of two juvenile judges at the Superior Court level. Right? Since 1995, that first option, that being the station adjustment, is not an option when the offense involves alcohol or drugs. If you are arrested in Hopewell Township or Hopewell Borough for a drug or alcohol violation, you will get a juvenile petition typed up against you, and it will either be disposed of through the juvenile courts or through our Juvenile Conference Committee. Okay, that's one of the things that the chief has done to address the problem, and again, with his zero-tolerance attitude towards drug and alcohol offenses, that seems to be working pretty good. Prior to 1995, our station was split down the middle on how we disposed of these matters. 50% of the cases, the juvenile matters, were, whether it involved alcohol or drugs, were disposed of with a station adjustment. The officers had that luxury, and they were making the determination on how the matter can be handled, and they chose to do it that way. The other 50% went to juvenile court. Since we implemented our new procedures, 85% of all of our juvenile cases are being disposed of through the court system, either a Jcc recommendation or the juvenile courts themselves, and only 15% are being station adjusted. Of the 85% that are going to juvenile court, the offenses, all of the offenses that involved alcohol or drugs are going to court. Okay, 100% of the alcohol and drug-related cases are going to court. There is no station adjustment with those. Another thing that Chief Czapowski has done is he's been able to obtain a number of grants through the police department, and we're using those grants to, again, take a proactive approach to solving or minimizing the alcohol and drug usage here in Hopewell Township. We have our standard DWI grants, which we use during the holiday seasons, during prom season, graduation time. We try to get a couple extra officers out on the road when we know that there's going to be parties, and minimize the number of drunk drivers out on the highways. We've also applied for a new grant and actually received it. It's a grant that we call Cops and Shops. The Cops and Shops program enables us to put plainclothes officers into liquor establishments and again, proactively enforce the drug and alcohol laws that may be violated there. Laws regarding fake identification, underage purchasing of alcohol, maybe somebody who's 21 or older purchasing alcohol and giving it to minors. All of these laws are enforced during those overtime patrols where the officers are actually either in the liquor establishment or in the parking lots of the establishments in plain clothes. Some of the other things that Chief Czapowski has done is he's assigned officers to permanent zone assignments. This enables the officers to get to know the area that they patrol more regularly, become more familiar with it, and that, along with the bicycle patrols that we have, the officers are finding out where the kids are drinking, where the kids are using drugs, and they're able to, again, proactively address the problem. We also have a good working relationship with our municipal alliance in trying to develop programs through the township that the kids can get involved in to minimize their downtime and keep them busy so that they don't decide to experiment with drugs and alcohol. Some of the laws that we're enforcing are your standard laws, you know, underage possession of alcohol, all of the narcotics laws and the narcotic paraphernalia laws, DWI laws. We've also pulled out some township ordinances that haven't been enforced in a few years, and we're starting to enforce them, especially when the officers are doing the Cops and Shops program. These ordinances deal with, again, underage possession of alcohol, entering liquor establishments while being under 21. In order to do that, you're supposed to be accompanied by a parent or guardian. And one of the new statutes that we're enforcing, which is a pretty good one, is the Juvenile Drinking and Driving Statute. Up until 3 or 4 years ago, if someone under the age of 21 went out drinking but didn't reach that legal limit of 0.01% blood alcohol content and was stopped by an officer, there wasn't a statute to charge him with drunk driving. Now anyone who's under the age of 21 who is stopped for a traffic violation and has any alcohol in their breath, they come up or any alcohol in their system, excuse me, and comes up a 0.01%, anywhere to a 0.09%, they can be charged under this statute. The statute's 39450.14. I refer to it as the Juvenile Drunk Driving Statute. The fines and penalties are the same as if you were legally drunk. And by legally drunk, I mean 21 or older at a 0.10% BAC. Some of the penalties that you're going to face, drunk driving statute, for example, the minimum fines range anywhere from up to $1,000 in fines. You're going to have to pay victims' compensation fines, DEDRA fines, which are drug and alcohol education programs. These fines go towards funding those programs. You could spend up to 180 days in jail. Right? License suspensions vary. The first offense, you can get a suspended license for up to 6 months. For a second offense, it's 2 years, and for a third offense, you're going to get a 10-year loss of license, driving privileges. You're required to attend up to 48 hours of IDRC training, which is an Intoxicated Driver Resource Center training. And all of these, that's just for your standard DWI offense. If you're under 21 and you're charged criminally with underage possession charge, the fines, again, are anywhere from $500 to $1,000. Violent crime compensation fees, pretty much the same fees as if you were in a motor vehicle. The only difference is if you're charged with a crime for underage possession and you're not in a motor vehicle, they can still suspend your driver's license. So if you're 15 or 16 years old and you're looking forward to getting your driver's license and you're out on a weekend sitting in a park having a few beers with your buddies, and an officer comes upon you, charges you with this violation, even though you don't have your license at that point in time, you may get a postponement on your privilege to drive in the state of New Jersey. And when you turn 17 and you go down to motor vehicles and apply for the test, they're going to tell you to come back in 6 months because the court imposed a suspension. So just because you don't have your license at that point in time doesn't mean that they can't suspend it. Okay. At this point, that pretty much sums up what I had to say here today. Again, I'm the first phase. The police department is the first phase of the procedure that you're going to go through. I tried to give you some idea about the zero tolerance attitude that we've taken nowadays. Some of the laws that we do enforce and we can enforce, they're different from school regulations, okay? There is a state law that says you can't possess alcohol on school property, even if you're over 21 or 21 and over. All right, if your older brother comes home from college during the holidays and wants to get together with you and your friends at a dance and brings a case of beer, he can be charged with that as well. Obviously, you're going to be charged. But in addition to these penalties, the schools may impose additional penalties. I know they have their standard school regulation handbook. If you participate in sports, they also have some guidelines for athletes who are participating in school athletics. Those regulations can be enforced by the school in addition to any penalties that the courts may impose. Right? And that goes for any school function. That just doesn't mean during school hours. You could be at a baseball game or a school dance and things like that, and they will impose those penalties as well. After our phase of the judicial process, you're going to go to court, and prior to that, you're probably going to speak with an attorney. I don't have a lot of information on how that's handled, but if you have any questions about that, I can answer. Does anybody have any questions right now? Somebody has to have a question. Yes, sir. I believe you have to come up to the mic, yes.
I was just curious, in the township, I guess, Hopewell Borough, Hopewell Township, et cetera, what is the biggest problem that the police force has to deal with? Be it narcotics, traffic, like what's the major problem?
The police force in general is dealing with a problem of burglary and theft, things along those lines. Because I handle a majority of the juvenile problems, and I would say 90% of my work is juvenile work, my main focus is on alcohol and drug involvement, okay, whether that be in school or out of school. That's basically what I deal with.
So
educational programs and things like that.
In general, would that be like the major problem of the township? Is that something that should be focused on in a big way? Or?
I think it's a good problem to focus on. It can lead to other problems, you know, traffic fatalities and things like that. So drugs tend to be the root of a lot of departments' problems, okay? If you're investigating burglaries and thefts and things like that, that tends to be because the person that's doing that crime may have some drug problem. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but usually the root of most of your problems is alcohol or drug related. Yes, sir.
Andrew Dobie, the Hopewell Valley YMCA, Detective Simonelli.
How you doing?
Obviously, you're here to tell teens and others about the effect after the fact of doing alcohol and drugs. In a sense, you are telling them what happens if this occurs. But my question is, what is happening in Hopewell Valley to tell the teens and others the harmful effects that it has on the body, that drugs and alcohol have on the body, and are we trying to point these things out, such as birth defects, cell change, and some permanent brain damage if done too early in life?
I believe that those topics are normally covered under the health curriculum within the schools. Our municipal alliance has some pamphlets and some information on how alcohol and drugs affect the bodies, alcohol usage and drug usage during pregnancy and things like that. Me personally, I don't get involved in how it affects the body, but I'm here on the criminal end of it. I mean, I could sit here and tell you that a high school girl going out to a party can make herself susceptible to a variety of other crimes that could occur where she's the victim of a crime, and all she was doing was being under the age of 21 and having a few drinks. But my main focus here is to touch on the fines and the penalties associated with the crimes of alcohol possession and drug possession.
Mm-hmm. I have one other question. How many drug-related and alcohol-related arrests are there in Hopewell Valley per year?
Per year. Involving juveniles?
Yes.
Most of my stats deal with juveniles. In 1995, we had 62 juvenile arrests last year in 1995. Halfway through this year, in 1996, we had 39, so we were looking at about an average of 78 arrests this year. Of those, I would say maybe 25 to 30% of them involve alcohol and drugs. The other ones are your harassment, criminal mischief, vandalism, things like that. It would be a rough estimate.
Statistically, the war on drugs is being lost. The current methods of fighting it are becoming obsolete. Prisons are flooded with nonviolent drug offenders and violent rapists, and murderers are being released. My question is, what does a singular narcotics bust do to the grand scheme of the drug problem, besides using up money? Wouldn't it make more sense to funnel money into awareness and prevention programs on a massive scale, and to classify drugs as a health problem and not a criminal problem?
Good question. I see drug usage as a health problem. I agree with you that the prisons are overcrowded. However, I also see a benefit to arresting that one individual with the drug, and that is minimizing those violent offenders and those offenders of other crimes in the future. I believe that a majority of the crimes that are committed, whether it be burglary, theft, assaults, are done, not all of them, but a majority of them are done involving drugs in one way or another. Either a person was high at the time that they did it, or that they have a habit that they're trying to maintain, and because they have the habit, they can't maintain regular employment and things like that. They're out doing burglaries and thefts. So the enforcement level, the street level enforcement does benefit society in that once that person is apprehended, we can steer them towards a drug treatment program and try to minimize their addiction, or prevent the addiction from further being a nuisance to the community. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, can I respond with another
Sure.
question? Yeah, in reference to that, like that's what you've been doing for like the last 20 years?
I've been on the job for 12, so yeah.
All right. Well, I was saying police in whole.
Right.
But isn't that like not working? Isn't that like not?
I wouldn't
doing
say it's
anything?
not working.
Like
It's
everything's on the rise, all the statistics.
juvenile crime is on the rise. Adult crime is steady. And, it's. I wouldn't say it's not working. I think what we have to do is identify the people who have the problem with drugs. I don't think legalizing it is an option, but identifying who has a drug problem and getting them the help and the counseling that is necessary. And I think the only way to do that is through the court system. Incarceration may not be the answer. Throwing somebody in jail for a drug violation is not the answer, in my opinion, unless there's some type of treatment program to go along with it. But and if you don't put them in jail and they're placed in a treatment program, then somebody has to be there to monitor it and monitor the individual's whereabouts, and that gets into parole and probation and funding for those things also. I think we're doing the best that we can with what we have right now. Yes?
You kind of just touched on this in saying that that legalization isn't an option. And I was just curious how you feel about the direct relationship between the tolerance in Amsterdam to their low crime rates or involving drugs and whatnot. Like, how do you feel about that?
I think the United States has a situation where, because of prison overcrowding and things along those lines, you can't throw every drug offender in jail, obviously. And we're getting back to treatment programs, counseling, parole, probation, and things like that. And the funding for those types of programs and those positions, parole and probation, is something that has to be addressed. But I don't think legalizing it is going to make it go away. If you legalize the use of marijuana, marijuana usage is going to lead to cocaine usage, et cetera, and you're still going to have the people who are legally addicted to cocaine now or legally addicted to marijuana out trying to support a habit. Okay, you with me?
Yeah, I am.
I don't think that legalizing it and allowing people to be addicted to or use it is going to minimize the amount of work that's lost and the fact that they can't hold a job, and in turn, it's going to increase your burglary statistics and your theft statistics and your violent crime statistics.
Well, that's been disproven in Amsterdam. The fact that they have like a 9% crime rate when it involving drugs, and that all comes from tourists, percentage-wise, then I'd say that they've solved the problem pretty successfully.
You and I differ in opinion.
Yeah. Well, what I was getting to is, if you did do that, if you did like tolerate or permit like the light drugs like cannabis and whatnot, then wouldn't that save a whole lot more money to wage like a more successful war and a more like intense and active war on the harder drugs like cocaine and heroin, the ones that actually they do immediate damage, they cause a lot of like long-time addicts and whatnot.
But where did those addicts begin? They began using marijuana.
Right.
So it's my opinion that if you're going to take the money out of enforcing the marijuana law, so to speak, then and you allow more people to experiment with marijuana, eventually you're going to have more people using the harder drugs. So I think you have to start with the gateway drugs, which would be alcohol and marijuana.
Okay.
Again, it's just my personal opinion. Got time for one more question.
I have a question about, you said before about the municipal alliance, you talk with them, and I was wondering, there's been a lot of complaints about how there's not many things for kids like teenagers, juveniles to do in this area, and I was wondering what type of actions you're taking to get activities or whatever, what you're doing in this situation.
Recently, the Municipal Alliance has approached a number of different sectors of the community regarding a Healthy Youth, Healthy Communities organization. What we're trying to do is find out what the kids want to do in town. I know that it covers, spread out over 64 square miles roughly, and having lack of transportation tends to be a problem. We're trying to address that issue right now. I've been in touch with a number of people that are associated with the Healthy Youth, Healthy Communities, and we're hoping that in the near future we can get the ball rolling with some long-term problems and long-term recreational things that will be in place so that the kids, not only high school and junior high school kids now, but the elementary school kids will benefit from. They've had the chaos dances, I know that. The school does its share of weekend school functions, but I don't think the problem falls on the school itself. It should fall on the community as far as YMCA, YWCA, and recreational things that the township should be promoting. I know they have their youth sports and things like that. Not everybody's athletically inclined and doesn't want to be, so there should be other options for them, and we're pursuing that right now through the Alliance and through the Healthy Youth, Healthy Communities.
Okay.
Any other questions? Thank you very much. Appreciate your cooperation.